Maar de laatste inleiding ging om circulair. Dat was eigenlijk dit was algemeen. Schrijven. Eigenlijk wil je dan ook bouwen. Eigenlijk iets juist bouwen.
Wat je gewoon kunt doen. Ik heb nu gewoon de desktop gedeeld, zeg maar. Dus als jij naar het scherm gaat, gewoon hetzelfde gebeuren als hier. Dus nu weer. Video of zo,
Ja.
die staat er dan op. Wat je hier niet moet doen, is dingen veranderen. Want nee, want je hebt nu eigenlijk feitelijk gewoon aan de linkerkant deel je je content, zeg maar. Dus gewoon wat het scherm hier ook weergeeft. En hier zie je gewoon, zeg maar, de spelers. Twee spelers.
En dus dan spreekt je zo'n team.
Dit is het. Ja, dit is het. Ja, dus ja, als je het kan spreken natuurlijk ook een wat grotere ding zetten, maar dan worden de slides weer zo lekker klein. Ja, dus deze kan je gewoon laten draaien. En als je wil dat mensen online het horen, dan moet je wel even zo'n microfoon gebruiken. Oh, die staat nu al aan, zie ik. Hierboven zit gewoon een knopje.
Aanzetten en dan werkt hij ook. Ja, werkt ook. going to do it this way. Welcome. I think we will just start and see if more people will drop in. I'm not sure whether everybody finished his or her coffee. I'm Reiner Brolsma, that is Ilse Voskamp. I'm working at Peltaris and she is working at Wenner, Wageningen University of Research. And we organized a session on the planning for effective urban nature-based solutions. And we would like to combine long-term visions and short-term actions and how they can contribute to each other. Well, everybody is already aware of nature-based solutions. They have been presented quite frequently, of course, these sessions. And what we see is that they are effective for climate adaptation, but they also provide additional benefits. And these co-benefits are very important for these construction or implementation and planning of nature-based solutions. And additionally, it's also thinking about existing green in cities. How can we add more functions to the existing green? And if you look at cities and urban nature-based solutions, there's of course a very wide range from soft to hard engineering solutions. So we have the parks, urban forests, which are really the soft ones. And we have hybrid, where we combine green and gray infrastructure. And on the right-hand side, you see a very gray solution, but still it contributes to the water management and water storage in urban areas. So as I said, a lot of benefits of nature-based solutions. Well, we start in this session from the perspective of climate adaptation. So that's flood mitigation, drought impact reduction, and heat stress reduction. But we also look at the other benefits, which is about resource efficiency, improving the water quality, air quality, also the noise reduction, flood mitigation, by improving the biodiversity, and also the aesthetics and health are very important. Last year, we published an article about tools for nature-based solutions, but we also tried to identify the barriers for implementing these nature-based solutions in cities. And we identified 4 barriers. One is the level of expertise that is frequently lacking, and we interviewed multiple cities across Europe for this. There's a lack of know-how and competence in the cities to start applying these types of solutions, and also to scale up these types of solutions. And then there's the institutional setting. Well, in the Netherlands, that is quite well arranged, fortunately, but in other countries, there's still a lot of institutional limitations for applying nature-based solutions. That can be, for example, for infiltration of stormwater into the subsurface, which is not allowed because it could result in groundwater contamination, like this in Germany. The availability of financial resources is an important one, and where do they come from? In traditionally, looking at stormwater management, they often have their own budget, but to invest in green solutions, that requires also the green department, and you would also like them to invest in these types of solutions. And because they have multiple benefits, which are often very important planning objectives of the city, improving the health, improving sustainable economic growth in cities, these budgets probably need to be combined. And how do you combine these? And finally, there's also the collaborative governance and planning for nature-based solutions. Most cities are very siloed, of course. They have their own departments and they have still difficulties to work together, to collaborate, to plan for nature-based solutions in cities. But fortunately, we see a lot of happening. On the left-hand side is the left top is the nature facing side that was also presented, containing of nearly 1,000 green, small scale, medium scale solutions. On the right-hand side, we see the urban blue-green grid site, which just provides examples, over 200 types of climate adaptation measures, of which most are green solutions. And on the lower right, you see the Climate Scan website, which is a crowdsourcing website, also showing all kinds of best practices of stormwater management solutions, but mainly also green solutions. They contain, I think, about over 3,000 measures nowadays, mostly in the Netherlands, but also across Europe. And on the right-hand side, you see, lower left, you see the CRC tool, that's just a tool for planning of nature-based solutions. So a lot of Small scale best practices are already there. There are multiple tools, there are ways to access these websites, but how do we use these in practice, or how do we plan for nature-based solutions in practice? That is something that we would like to dive into in this session. And then on the other hand, cities, for example, in the Netherlands, have a lot of ambitions. They have green visions, green plans, structure visions, and they are all about more green. Or as they say in Amsterdam and Utrecht, for example, we'd go for green solutions unless it is not possible. But then you have to explain why you do not apply these. But this is large scale, large ambitions, and we have a lot of small scale solutions. And how do we bridge the gap? That is something that we would like to dive into in this session. This was the introduction. Ilse will provide a vision for Arnhem for 2100, which is a very long-term vision, of course. And then Daniel Goedbloed will explain about Rainproof Amsterdam and how they work to a more climate resilient and also green city. Jeroen Kluk from the University of Applied Sciences of Amsterdam will also explain how climate adaptation can take place or can occur in cities, what types of solutions, and explaining it is not difficult to do so. And finally, Rens Wijnakker of Fabrication will give an introduction of really a bottom-up approach of nature-based solutions based on his own experiences. And then in the end, we would like to have a discussion with the speakers, but also with you on what your experiences are for implementing nature-based solutions and how can we work towards these large-scale visions. Ilse, shall I give the floor to you?
Can you hear me properly like this? Yeah. I need to stay a bit around the computer to move the slides, but I hope you can all see me from here. Okay, well, I will start with a very large scale or long-term vision, you could say, talking about the city in 100 years. The city of Arnhem we took as an example to explore what a long-term vision for a nature-based city could look like. And maybe some of you already heard Tim van Hattem in the morning talking about this vision for the Netherlands in 2120, a positive scenario of our country, what it might look like if we dare to look to our distant future in a positive way. So to a vision that is meant to be inspiring, courageous, but still realistic. And then realistic, especially in that it applies nature-based solutions as a starting point. It looks at the potential of the landscape, of the different types of landscapes within the Netherlands, of our marine landscapes, and what does it has to offer for us to become a sustainable society, you could say. In line with this vision, we thought, well, what would this mean for an urban area? If we applied the same kind of reasoning, what kind of vision would we arrive at? And then we took the city of Arnhem as an example. Well, why did we take Arnhem? Here you see a height map of one of the most dramatic height differences in the Netherlands. So you see on top the higher sandy soils, and below there is the river area of the River Rhine. And I think, well, I really like this map showing that it is a very steep border between these high sandy soils, where we have the Veluwe, one of our major nature areas as well, and then this river area of the River Rhine. And well, we did it as a case study. So the principles that we developed for this city of 2120, we said they should not only be applicable to Arnhem, but also to other cities in the Netherlands. And as it was formulated in the vision for the Netherlands in 2120, that we have to move more towards these higher sandy soils from a climate perspective, because this is the safe place, high and dry, to live in the future. We thought, well, we definitely have to come up with ideas for the city on the sandy soils. But of course, a lot of the Dutch cities are built in the more delta area parts of the Netherlands, North and South Holland. So the river area in that sense is also very relevant to develop design proposals for. Well, we took several guiding principles for this vision, and the most important one was that landscape is the basis. And what you see here is the layer approach, which is commonly used in the Netherlands already for a long time. And in the left, you see the common picture, you could say, that we have shown over years, where you see the subsurface, then the network layer, and then the occupation layer. And that it's important to account for all of these. But actually, nicely shown in this new figure at the right, taking landscape as a basis actually means that what is happening in this subsurface, so what's happening in the lower layer, that it comes back actually in the layers above, so that the choices that we make for infrastructure, the choices that we make for building and other kinds of land uses, they are connected to what's happening in the subsurface, to differences in height, soil types, or maybe wet and dry areas. Well, this was our main guiding principle. And of course, we looked into what is going on in terms of scenario studies, trend analysis. What do we already know, or what do we think we know of what the future might look like? And of course, climate change is then one very important development to take along, to look into the scenarios that have been developed. But if you want to come up with a vision for a city, there are so many more domains you have to take into account. So one of the studies shown here at the left is, for example, a study into the trends of mobility. What will our future mobility look like? Are we talking about autonomous vehicles, more drones, so different kinds of transport? And what kind of implications does it have for our city of the future? But at the same time, we looked at what kind of ambitions are there, for example, for nature, where there are large ambitions for the river area, for the River Rhine, which is a part of this area of the city of Arnhem, but of course also to delta scenarios and to prognosis in terms of household sizes and the growth of the population. Well, besides this analysis, we also looked into the landscape itself. What does it have to offer? As you can see, we did this study in Corona times. So we had atelier sessions where experts from all kinds of different fields came together, brought their knowledge from their domain. So for example, mobility, geomorphology, but also from urban climate. They brought, of course, that baggage with them, but also they brought their maps, and we brought everybody together and to see, well, what kind of characteristics of the landscape surface, which kind of things do we see as qualities, where do we see room for improvement, but also maybe where do we see potential for solutions. And we, well, integrated this analysis in, you could say, a SWOT analysis of Arnhem municipality. So the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that we saw. Here is a very short summary just to highlight a few. If you look at the map of the municipality, you see that we identified 4 landscape types related to also what is shown in the height map. In yellow, you have the higher grounds. Then you have this Veluwe fringe, so this steeper area. And then in the river area, well, you can discriminate between the polders and really the river itself. And if we then look at, well, what does this landscape has to offer, but also what is coming its way, a few points that we identified was, well, there is a lot of cultural heritage, for example, on this Veluwe fringe. There are nice estates which already have an important role, for example, in terms of recreation. This is something, of course, heritage that we want to bring to the future as well. If we think about weaknesses, we saw on these higher grounds that there is a lot of evapotranspiration. there are a lot of pine forests, and there is sandy soil. So not only does the water infiltrate easily, but also the water is there, taken up by the trees, is also lost easily. So we saw room for improvement. If we then look at the combination of developments in the area, well, as opportunities, for example, for this polder area, we saw opportunities for an international biodiversity corridor. But of course, there is also this threat of flood risks with more precipitation coming our way and higher river levels. Taking that all into account, we came up with some ideas for solutions for all the different tasks that we see for a city of the future. For example, the housing assignment, but also ambitions for nature or for water buffering, for energy generation. And we try to express that as the size or the footprint that is needed for those solutions, and compared it to the size of the municipality of Arnhem. And as you can see, adding these up is a lot bigger than the size of Arnhem itself, and especially if you look at timber production, if we really want to have circular buildings built from locally built timber, this is not going to fit in Arnhem. As you see, the size of the municipality is there below the line a bit on scale. So some of the solutions you can't fit within the area itself, but more importantly, it's important to think about integrated solutions, smart combinations, and multifunctional land use. So, while taking all this analysis into account and bringing it forward to a design, resulted in this vision for the city in 2120, the city of Arnhem, where you see you could say 3 areas coming back again. So on top you have these higher sandy soils where now the city is actually expanding towards a sort of beach. You see in linear lines from south to north going towards this safer, higher ground, you could say. On these flanks, you see that the built-up area is penetrated by green space, which is very important for the ventilation of the city. This is green space that accompanies the brooks that are already there, so that the downward wind that is already there naturally comes back into the city from the higher grounds. And we say, well, the polders and the river area, well, this is in the future, this should be one area in itself. The dikes will be removed there, and this is a dynamic area where there is living, agriculture, nature, transport, everything in this very vibrant landscape. Well, just to briefly give you an idea what this might look like, we say this might be the Veluwe in 2120. A very different area, no pine forest anymore, but a deciduous forest, living energy generation, and more open grassland. So a very different kind of ecosystem where also nature and living and transport all comes together. If we think about the flanks, we see an almost un-Dutch kind of landscape where these brooks have got near waterfalls where there are nice cool spots to recreate. You see the drones that deliver the packages and the nice buildings from timber production. And if we think about the river area, we see, well, this layer approach that I showed, this multifunctionality really comes back here. There is room for the water to expand when it is needed. There's room for biodiversity, for agriculture, and it makes use of all the potential that it has with changes over time. So what I wanted to show you is this vision as some food for thought. This long-term vision, 100 years ahead, it's very far, but I hope to bring along, well, the question, or to raise the question with you, how does looking ahead to our distant future influences actually the choices that we make today? Having this desirable image maybe of our city in 2120, how will it help us to make smart decisions nowadays? Thank you.
Thanks for this inspiring. Thanks for presenting this inspiring study. We have time for some questions. Are there any questions to Ilse? doing?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So do I need to repeat the question maybe? Yeah. So I said that evapotranspiration on this Veluwe is a bad thing. And why is it actually a bad thing? Because we need the wood maybe for timber production in the future. And so no, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Evapotranspiration in itself and the wood production is both beneficial. But we say if we really want to sort of let this landscape be a sustainable system again, then we need to rethink the kind of vegetation that is there. And we can also produce wood with other kinds of vegetation, like deciduous forest. Then there is more groundwater recharge. And that is actually one of the things that came up in our study, that's really an issue in the area, but also broader, that groundwater isn't recharged, and now it's depleted. So, well, we have to rethink the way the landscape is working, you could say, and that's why we chose also for different types of vegetation. Thank you. Yeah.
Time for one more question. Otherwise, I do have a question. How was the study received by city?
Yeah, it was very well received. It was, we gave it, you could say, as a present to the alderman of Arnhem. Maybe I should say she's from Green Left Party, so that makes it maybe easier to have it positively accepted. But I think what is really nice is that it triggered something for them to think about. Also within the municipal organization, so something is really, a ball started rolling, I could say. So let's hope it translates to actions these days, but that's maybe something also for discussion later.
Thank you. Then I would like to give the floor to Daniel Goedbloed of Waternet.
Someone is making a bit noise, right?
Yeah.
Okay, you can probably hear me now. All right, thanks. My name is Daniel Goedbloed. I'm the program leader of Amsterdam Rainproof, which actually started in 2014, which is a completely different governmental model actually to create, on the other hand, awareness and to work towards a climate adaptive city. We started in 2014 from the water cycle company Waternet, doing everything on water in Amsterdam, drinking water, water safety, but also sewage water. And what they saw was that we were doing a lot on raising awareness and doing extreme downpour events, but the message was not really getting along. So they created this new governmental model, placing it outside of our own company and starting to work in a network approach with the main goal of rainproofing, and this was rainproofing. We started with that, but we are now working on the complete climate adaptation themes. So also heat and drought as well, and heat and drought as well. Well, creating awareness and trying to mainstream actually work in the private and the public space, in the public domain, increasing sponge in the city, but also of course creating cool spots, and also trying to get programs where. I'm going to give a short introduction, really short, on what this program is. So it's a network organization connecting and facilitating a lot of stakeholders around. And then I'm going to dive into deeper more of the nature-based solutions and how we are going to approach these. But from this creating awareness, I just wanted to pinpoint that we're working a lot with all kinds of organizations inside of the city. And creating awareness is not just doing flyers, but really connecting to things which are happening in the city. So festivals, and trying to get awareness in these festivals for instance, with a rain bar where it starts raining and you get wet actually, but when you get wet, you get a rain beer, which is made from rainwater for 2 for the price of 1. But this bartender is telling you actually the story, what you can actually do yourself to make the city more climate adaptive and what your role is in this. So this is more or less like the fun part of our program. Also, we started this initiative of having a competition of getting detiling gardens, and we're trying to count these tiles. Competition started between Amsterdam and Rotterdam. Rotterdam was the city I worked for prior to working for Amsterdam. Competition which is now actually nationally. Last year we got rid of more than 1 million tiles in all of the Netherlands. And doing this, we're trying to facilitate actually a lot of people living in the city. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for them to get rid of the tiles. So the municipality has this detiling service which comes along every first Monday of the month in a certain area, and you're allowed to just put your tiles on the street, and then the municipality will take them along. And other things is that we see that we are creating awareness, but people still have a lot of questions. Okay, what can we do actually in my own situation? So how can I make my own garden climate adaptive? So we initiated rainproof coaches, 6 coaches in Amsterdam, in the south of Amsterdam, who are free of charge, will give you advice, will come along, see what your own personal situation is, and then give you advice. So this is what we do a lot work with the vicinity. But let's look at how we've been working with the municipality to get actually the whole city itself more rainproof and more, actually, you could say also biodiverse, more heat stress. So we really, if you want to do that, you really have to get into the whole process of which the city normally does. So we influenced policy and guideline programs, we influenced key figure people, and we also influenced the instruments which are there. One of the things we did is the sewer management policy, which now has this norm actually that we will have no damage in the city with a downpour event, which repeats once every 100 years. So, and this means that the city has to do all of the projects which they do, so in parks, but also in streets. They have to meet this ambition. So this means that in every project, this actually has to land. So what we did is actually we then looked at the city. Okay, well, how bad is it, and where do we see that we are not actually meeting this norm? So we did a hydrodynamic modeling of the city, the surface, and also the sewer system. We came up with bottlenecks, wet spots in the city, and we actually made them like urgency. So the red wet spots are really extremely urgent, and we have to get them fixed in a period of 5 years. The green ones, the blue ones in 10 years, and the green ones in 15 years. And that's just speeding up the process. So what we're saying is that every time you're redoing a street, you're redoing anything in the city, you incorporate this into your work, and then you slowly and gradually grow to a climate adaptive city. But how actually are you going to do this in your projects itself? So because every time the project is done, people are going to ask us the question, okay, so what should I do here? And then a project or a street is really connected to a whole system of streets. So what we did is we identified actually catchment areas in which you should look at the solutions of capturing rainwater. So this is a normal capturing a catchment area, and we made these rainproof solutions map. So we actually, in a workshop format, we got the project leader, a sewer manager, people with knowledge of green, all different kinds of people inside a room, look at all kinds of map layers of the heavy downpour where there is a lot of rain collecting, but also the elevation in the city itself, and then figuring out, okay, so if we want to rainproof this area, where do we see the possibilities to actually store water? Where do we see possibilities to actually discharge water to? And where do we want to actually spread water in the streets? So, and this really works quite well because this gives you a general idea, not really the complete solutions, but a general idea of what kind of solutions you need to look at in this city. And from this, people can work then in their planning of work being done. They can take this map and say, okay, so I should incorporate something like this, and then now I'm working on this project, I should actually incorporate it and get it actually also calculated. So water retaining street or water spreading street, so actually streets where you actually try to hold back the water in the street itself. And then if that's not possible, you want to discharge it somewhere else. So discharging streets. And then you have water storing streets. So this is more or less the principles we're working with in the city. And this seems to be working quite well because this really gets also the programming in the city well along. And this is actually a map of all these kinds of discharging or solutions maps which we have been made or have to be made still. But let's zoom into this river neighborhood because I have some projects which I want to show you where we're actually including nature-based solutions really in the city itself. This, I would say, is not really nature-based, but it is really possible to infiltrate a lot of rainwater. So this is a pervious parking space, which normally would have been tiled. They detiled it and then put in this grinds. What's the name for grinds? Is well, like stones, pebbles, a pebble structure, which is completely pervious. What we also learned from this, so this is what you see is that this is quite important. If we're introducing new kinds of solutions in the city, and then you see that the city people, the municipality, if they want to introduce this, they need it to be standardized. So they can do some pilots, you can do a pilot, but if you've done a pilot, you want to prove that the pilot works, and then from then on, you can upscale it. So we did this, and we saw that this is not really a good solution because there are a lot of cars driving, the pebbles are being spreaded, and actually the plastic crates will be damaged after a few years. So lessons learned. Next parking space, they just made the infiltration system right underneath the cars. So these are kinds of developments we're seeing. Actually quite technically hard, technically this is of course. And then this was one of the first actually SUDs, so really a wadi kind of construction where there was a lot of green in the Betondorp, which looks really great, but it's still like, I would say like it's not really paved area, so it's like we have quite some space to really do this. It's been tested, so we've been testing it how good the infiltration is. And then we have actually tried to copy this more into the more hardened surface and also try to see how it works when you really deepen it a little bit more. And then you see that you really need to strengthen the sides with these, well, how do you say, more construct kinds of way. And this is of course really, really expensive. So also this is something we will not see that to be upscaled in a lot of situations. Nice thing here is actually what we try to do is actually what you want to do, of course, with these storing situations is you want to retain the water quite long for the green also to grow in the dry situations. So they made this open, or it's not, well, it's like an open crate system underneath, which is closed off on the sides and underneath. So it's like a small bathtubs, which can hold the water really long. The only problem was that these bathtubs were quite technically with foil. And when we tested the whole system after a year, we saw that it actually leaked out of these bathtubs. And then you see that it's quite difficult to actually repair something like that because it's underground. It's been, we've planted up on top of it, and then, well, how are you going to figure this out? So this is actually quite, I would say, a technical solution which has a lot of high chance of failure. So we're not implementing this anymore in that kind of way. Another one is just really greening, so depaving and really greening it also in a biodiverse, in a kind of way that there is a lot of diversity in it. Here you see, and this is actually, these are SUDs, so there's actually, it's lowered the area, but it's not lowered that much. but it's possible to lower it, and we can't lower it too much because it's right next to the road. So if you lower it too much, you would need these heavy constructions, what I showed just before. So we're trying to actually just work with these normal standardized curbs. And this is also all these kinds of things, we try to standardize it. And this is coming along, it's actually taking some time. Okay. This is how it looked like before. So this is when we redid it, it's just completely sand, took out the sand and then filled it. And this is how it looks like now, which I think really looks nice. So we're really benefiting. So we're really seeing a lot of areas which have been greened, but it's really also still hard to get this standardized. So we're really looking at plants, but we're also looking at the smaller details which are in the handbook, so the standardized design of the city. So this is one of this with the hard sides, and then I think this is more or less the last slides. Is one of the other things we're testing now. We're testing this with Reinder in a project, which is also really hard. Is what we want to do is what's actually the English word for this? It's green pavers. Inside of the city designers are not really fond of this. They're saying, well, okay, this is the way we want to have the city look like, and how well do they work? So how does maintenance work? So we have to test all of these things. How is the infiltration capacity? How long will it last? So you see that to really upscale these kind of things, we are busy with testing a lot of these things for several years before we can go along. So this is one of the things which you could say are holding us back a bit. So we're trying to get these green infrastructures, the nature-based solutions implemented in, let's say, all of the projects, but you really have to test them first before we can really upscale them. And I understand this because I wouldn't be fond of getting such a solution upscaled, and then after 3 years we're discovering, well, this is not really the good solutions, and then you have to take them all out. So this is also, when we're testing this, we really have to test them thoroughly in a good kind of way so we can upscale them. So that was my
Thank you for this very interesting.
You're welcome.
We have time for 1 or 2 questions. Are there any questions?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a once every 100-year event. So once every 100-year event, we're actually not really designing just the nature-based solutions in this. It's just complete design of the public space, which should be able to withstand a once every 100-year event without water flowing into the buildings. And what we're testing is we're looking at how the infiltration capacity, what should that be? But we don't have a standardized that it should be a minimum of this. So we're really looking at how can we design it in such a way or construct it in such a way that the infiltration capacity or the storage capacity is as high as possible. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. True, it needs to be emptied in something like 24 hours, a little bit less. But the sewer system can discharge something like 20 millimeters of rain per hour constantly. So we'll see that you'll have water in the streets for several hours, and then the sewer system is able to really discharge it all. And then the rest will be actually then infiltrated in here. And we're also looking at when are you going to get them actually working? So let me get back to this, for instance. Do you want the water to flow first into the nature-based solutions, or do you want to first have it flow to the sewer system and then just overflow into the nature-based solutions? So it's also a thing which we have to figure out which is the best, and it differs in certain situations.
Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah.
I have to go to the next. More questions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Jeroen Kluk. I'm professor at Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences, and I have a research group all focusing on urban climate adaptations, so the effect of the climate change for urban areas and how to deal with this. And most research we do is very practical oriented, with many municipalities helping them, can we do, what's effective in climate adaptation. And so now I was asked to tell you something about nature-based solutions for climate adaptation. And of course, those nature-based solutions, but Rainer told you already, most of it I think, they are logical, very efficient for climate adaptation. They can provide storage for stormwater flooding, they can provide infiltration, and for heat stress they can of course lower the surface temperature if you have green on the ground, and they can provide shade if you have a tree. So there are many examples why you would have nature-based solutions, and also many co-benefits. But there are also many reasons why things don't work, or municipalities don't take them up, because cost, space, other departments and everything. But in the Netherlands, in fact, we have quite, if you talk about long-term vision and short-term, we have some kind of long-term vision, because since 2015 we said in the Netherlands, every reconstruction in the Netherlands should be done in a climate resilient way. So if you're going to open the street and redo it, it has to be climate resilient. So we have some way of climate resilience, long-term vision. And if you think that every street is reshaped or redone every 30 years, after 30 years, we have everything climate resilient. And by then, of course, the climate has changed, so we have to redo it over again. But okay, we can keep continuing this. But in fact, we have some effect that we can easily make everything climate resilient. And also about the logic, we have many design rules for designing streets, waterways, and everything. And if you think the meteor is changing, the meteorology is changing, so there's more rain coming, then it's logical that you change your design rules. Okay? You take account of more heavy rainfall or more heavy drought. But the problem is that we don't know what to choose, or at least we did not know. And so that's one of the things I've been working at, to help municipalities decide what is climate resilient, how many millimeters per hour, or what heat stress, and what way heat stress should be reduced. This one. I will tell you about some of the projects I've been doing on this. One is on urban flooding, and connects very well to the thing Daniel just told us. And the other thing is about urban heat. So we made a book of examples of how you can retrofit your urban residential area in a climate resilient way. And we started this project because we heard from many municipalities that they thought, okay, yes, I know what to do, and I think it's possible, but my colleagues don't believe it, or I need to show it. And they say it's very expensive, but can you show us how expensive it is? So we did for like 10 different examples in about seven different type of urban areas. So we have, for example, high-rise garden city, low-rise, or garden city, or historical area, or pre-war building block, which is this one. All those different built-up areas, we made designs of a regular situation and retrofitting it just in the normal way or in some climate resilient ways. So this is an example of the pre-war building block in a flat area, in fact in Amsterdam. And normally, if we would retrofit this and don't take into account too much heavy rainfall, it was before Daniel was working on 70 millimeters, we just didn't take into account a lot of rainfall. We said, okay, 20 millimeters is enough. Then you would expect flooding all over the street and maybe water in the houses. And then we said, okay, but very easily this can be solved just by lowering the street level. So you provide storage for the water during extreme rain event, in the same line as Daniel just explained. This is not really, this climate resilient, but it's not really a nature-based solution. But some of the solutions can be very well be done also with a swale. So you can lower the green area at the side of the road, and you can store water there temporarily or have it infiltrating there. These are two of the solutions. And for all of those solutions, we did an analysis of the cost, the damage cost, the maintenance cost, and construction cost. The damage cost is, of course, how much damage does a rainfall event give, and we took into account how often it occurs. So we got estimated for a number, and I'll show you one of them, which is the pre-war building block again. And so the most left on the variant 0 is traditional redesign, and of course, that's not climate proof. And that was before we started thinking of this, or how should we do it. But then the other three, they all are more climate resilient. You see the red bar is gone, or almost gone. There will also be always be some possibility of some damage. But the total cost is lower or not much higher than in the traditional redesign. And the first variant was the one with lowering the street, but the second variant was with the swale. And so it's just for a little bit more money. You have a green area and you have climate resilient design. What else should I say from this one? It is only the thing is, of course, that there will be more money will be needed for maintaining the green instead of maintaining the sewer and the street. So possibly there should be some money going from the sewer system or the sewer department towards the green department. I find it very easy, but I know that in the municipality this can be very difficult. Okay, this was very short because I don't have too much time, but climate adaptation can be done for the same cost. And we showed it for several locations. And we also looked in the additional benefits of green. So we took the same street and also several others. First place, we removed all the green on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, we placed something back and maybe something extra. And then we compared those situations. And we did a cost-benefit analysis of the situation with the tool in the Netherlands, which is DeepStat, the economics of ecosystems and biodiversity. And now we looked through all the possibilities. It was health, energy, real estate, and so on. And we thought not only the three, the first, the third, and the sixth, they were sufficiently sound to be analyzed. Or, okay, so if we took only those, and we thought, if we can analyze those, we already have a good answer. So about health, it is about people in a greener area go less to the doctors, and so they can work more often, happier, and in fact, less visiting doctors is already a huge amount of money. And the other one is the real estate. Houses in the vicinity of green have a higher value. And we didn't take this higher value directly into account, but we took the amount of money you have to pay to the government for having a house with a higher value. So it's the taxes you pay extra, so this money is going really to the municipality or to the national government. And then the final one was water management, because we were working for the water managers and they were very interested in this. And they were a bit disappointed because the blue part was very small. You see here. But what we see is that the benefit of greening versus the cost of the reconstruction of the whole street, climate proofing the street was all the time, that was quite high. But even more, there's something happening there?
Only water running.
Water running, okay. But more importantly, if you look at the benefits of the cost of greening versus the cost for the greening, and the 100% is the cost for the greening, then all the solutions were cost efficient. The only problem is there's nobody really paying for this extra green, and the municipality always thinks, okay, and the more green I have, the more money I need to spend, and there's no income for this. Okay, this is one of the problems, of course. I think you knew it, but we really thought about those examples and we showed that this could be the case. Okay. So this can be done in a climate for the same cost, and there are additional benefits from the greening. Then the other thing I wanted to show you is about heat stress. Heat stress is even more difficult to decide what to do than stormwater flooding, because stormwater flooding, you can think, okay, once in so many years I expect 50 millimeters, 60 millimeters, 70 millimeters, and people are discussing about this. How many millimeters should it be? But in the end, you can decide, okay, so many millimeters, and I want to have no flooding once in so many years. But what about heat stress? There's no real goal what we should prevent. In fact, heat stress in cities gives many deaths a year. For the example, in the Netherlands, we have 250 deaths a year because of heat stress. And even if you do many things, or do everything possible, people will still die because of heat stress. So, what do we choose? And also, how do we analyze it? It's about the surface temperature, the air temperature, the physiological temperature. So there were quite some questions. And of course, finally, what is most effective? So we did a study, and finally we came up with two goals. One is you need to decrease the locally perceived temperature, so the physiological equivalent temperature. So if you go outside, it should not be too hot. And the other thing is the air temperature should be decreased. So because the air temperature is related to the health. And lower air temperatures make it the night is also cooler, and in general people can sleep better and have less health problems. So, and for those three goals, we made three guidelines. One is every house should be within 300 meters within a cool spot. And this guideline, we came up with this together with some of the municipalities, was really a choice because we could not say, okay, this threshold in temperature should be sufficient, no more than once a year this temperature or something. It was too difficult. And we said, okay, we turn it around and we make it a positive thing. We say, how can you improve the city with the guidelines for heat stress? So we came up with many cool spots in the city. And the other one is, if you go outside, there should be sufficient shadow in the urban area. So, and why 300 meters? There was some kind of rule that every house should be within 300 meters of a park. So we could connect to this. And why 30 to 40% of shadow on the pedestrian areas? We have been looking at different photos together with a panel, and we choose, okay, 50% might be too much, 20 too little, okay, 30 to 40. So science, eh? So this, but municipalities are now picking up those rules and hoping to improve the city in a climate resilient way. In the air temperature, also on this part, we thought the more green, the better. And Wageningen University came up with a rule of thumb that 10% point of more green in the city gives half a degree reduction of the average temperature, air temperature. So okay, this should be the direction to choose, but it's very hard to say what's enough. And therefore we looked at all different actual percentages of green in cities, and we said, okay, at least each city should be above the average for its topology, but we promoted should be above the average plus a standard deviation. So standard deviation, some science in it. But it's very hard to decide, but we hope municipalities are now starting, okay, we don't know what to do, but this is the first idea we have. And it's happening. Municipalities are writing down. Daniel, Amsterdam. Okay. And something more about this distance to cool spots, also called the flip-flop distances. So if you are old and you have wearing flip-flops, you can, on a hot day, you can walk to the cool spot. And we said at least 200 square meter of a perceived temperature lower than 35 degrees. 35 degrees because this was based on a study in Germany saying, okay, below 35 degrees PET, it's not air temperature, but PET, then it's still some way acceptable, and above it, it will be terrible. This looks very technical, but in fact, as soon as you're in the shadow, it's okay. So in fact, we're promoting shady places. And to my opinion, it doesn't have to be 200 square meter. It should be a design of a square or a small place in the city where people can go to and during a hot day relax. And there might be some water, some benches, maybe some grass to sit in. But it should also be designed in such a way that in the rest of the year, because many times in the year we don't have so much sun, you can lay in the sun or sit on a bench in the sun. So it's combining a guide for heat stress and a guide for improving the city. And this map, which is available for all of the Netherlands on the climate effectiveness, you can see in red houses which are too far away from a cold spot. So these were some guidelines we came up with the municipalities, what's essential and what is the bonus. So it should really be an attractive place to be. So, and then I can conclude. So the climate adaptation, I think we need nature-based solutions in climate adaptation. They are effective, possible, and they have many co-benefits. And I think if you want to make this work, I think we should work the greening, link the greening and the climate adaptation together, because there is some reason and there's even some agreement in the Netherlands that we will do the climate adaptation. So, and there's many reasons to do the greening. So I think if you put them together, it will work out. And the other two I've said already. So that's it.
Thank you for doing this presentation and trying to make it simple for cities to
Yeah,
come up with
that's
climate adaptation options and also for greening. Any questions? No questions for now? Joseph.
Yeah, I was wondering, when you calculate the cost benefits of the
Mm-hmm.
what kind of timeline did you have in mind?
Yes. I can't say anymore if it's 100 years or 60 years, something like this. So in a time period in which you have to reconstruct it many times, or several times. So things which stay for a long time and things which have to be reconstructed several times are leveled out in this way.
Continue to the next presentation because we're behind the schedule.
So this.
No, that's I think all our fault.
I'll put this in my pocket. Where is the thing? Here. All right. So, yeah, I was just asking, you're still okay, but I can see you're still awake. Good. My name is Rens Wijnacker. I'm a landscape architect in fabrications, and this is what I do for my work. And as you can see, it's not that different from what was presented this morning by Tim van Hattem. We work a lot for mainly national governments, evaluating all different kinds of spatial scenarios for the Netherlands, how they relate to each other and what it means for our environment. Drawing nice maps with that, and I could talk about this to you for hours, but I don't have hours, so I'm not going to talk about this today, unfortunately. Here you can see a small zoom. I love to show this kind of map, how the differences take place. But today I'm going to talk about something more personal, about where I live in Hilversum, on a fringe between high and low, just like Arnhem, not that spectacular. And as a landscape architect looking at maps of the Netherlands, basically day in and out, I thought Hilversum is the place where I should live. It's just above sea level, perfectly connected from Amsterdam and Utrecht. There's nature nearby, and it is a climate-proof city. This is my front garden. This is when we lived here for 3 months. There was a cloudburst, and basically the whole neighborhood was flooded. What you might imagine is that this looked nice. We were lucky because our house was not flooded. Our neighbors had a basement which was full of water. And what was also very striking is that it was extremely smelly, especially the next day, because we have a mixed sewage system. So there was basically just shit floating through the streets, people having that in their hallway. That's why I started to think about, like, yeah, as a landscape architect, I saw everywhere opportunities to improve my own neighborhood. And I started to look at the city, which is, you analyzed some of the different types of neighborhoods. This is a pre-war garden city, really working class neighborhood, small houses, small gardens, and quite some public space, which used to be very green. It consisted of green streets with patches of grass, green fingers, and also designated water storages at the edge of our neighborhood. But what happened over time is that our neighborhood became what I call Hufter-proof. So it's paving areas of grass which were hard to maintain, but also putting these ugly barriers, small piles everywhere. I think there are more than 1,000 of them in our neighborhood. This is what a playground looks like. I'm not sure if these fences are meant to keep the kids in or keep the vandals out, but at least it's not a very friendly environment. And this is also what you see if you look at, let's say, more analytical maps. Our neighborhood is very wet after a cloudburst because it's a hilly area, so you have accumulation of rainwater. And on the other side, it's very hot in the summer. So I joined this citizen initiative called the Groene Loper, the Green Walkway. And it's a small group of people. We are with around 8 people, but we take all kinds of initiatives, and we are backed by the municipality for this, because it was an outcome of a neighborhood agenda, so a process of improving our neighborhood. So what we try to do is collect ideas from people that live in our neighborhood. So we stand on markets and on presentations like this, but then not academic, but for the people that live near us. And also we have a website where we share advices. We have some very specific circumstances in our neighborhood, like small gardens, but also, for instance, people have their own waste containers, which costs around 3 square meters of their garden. Well, no more place for some green, so we advise about that. And we try to help the people that live in our neighborhood through every skill. So one of the actions that we did, funded by the municipality, was giving away regentonnen, rain barrels. One of the challenges was actually connecting these rain barrels, because many people were willing to bring those. And then after that, you saw in a neighborhood app, can someone help me to connect this barrel? I don't know how or where to buy this stuff. And what we also do, we walk around with people from the municipality, from let's say the maintenance department, and we just have a look where are opportunities to do on this micro scale improvements. There's improving the position of trees, trying to make things just slightly bigger. It's just a few square meters, but if you do it in many places, it works. What you can see here, and this is one of the challenges in our neighborhood, is that the municipality is very hesitant to do, let's say, actions below surface, and that is it used to be a very industrial neighborhood. There's a lot of pollution here. There were many factories, amongst them one just behind the houses that you see, which was an ink factory. Pollution goes deep, till 50 or 100 meters deep, but it's also very close to the surface. So many of the ideas that we have, they have to be done, let's say, on top of the current surface, which is a pity from, let's say, climate adaptation perspective. Anyway, we are still doing many nice things. So making these small pocket parks, also with the neighborhoods in. We really have to look for areas you can see here behind the houses. Also, as a landscape architect, I do design proposals for the municipality, showing them with what kind of measures you can increase the amount of green. This was the parking place that you just saw in front of our house, which was flooded. And what we also do is, and there are many urban developments taking place, and we literally get the ruler and measure if these urban developments meet the requirements that are in the neighborhood zoning plan. And so they always try to scoop off some green and make some extra square meters of buildings, well, we try to scoop off some square meters of buildings and make some extra green. And because these numbers are in this neighborhood agenda, these requirements for amount of green, we can really point out where it goes wrong. And what we are trying to achieve is, let's say, a continuous green network in our neighborhood, which is nice for people and but also for animals and plants, and hopefully for water storage. I want to talk a little bit about, let's say, what are the success factors of our group. Where I live is a working class neighborhood, and many people are not necessarily happy when a parking place goes out and some green comes instead. So what we are really keen on is that our group consists of, let's say, all the new citizens. And new, I mean import from Amsterdam, because that's what it mostly is in Hilversum. And old are the people that really used to work at these factories that live here already since birth. We have a group of people that's willing to invest a lot of time, and that is disappointing that it costs so much time as a citizen to voluntarily improve your neighborhood, but it costs like hours per week. And we have a very open attitude to the municipality. We try not to fight them. That's very helpful. And what also helps is that we have a very accessible project manager. His name is Gijs. I could call him now and show what I'm doing here. What I already talked about is a policy-backed agenda and budget for making the neighborhood greener, which makes it much easier to execute these initiatives like this rain barrels. And yeah, I have a personal, and also other people in this group have experience with, let's say, governance, with politicians, with talking to people like aldermen or directors in the municipality, which makes it easier. But if you don't have all these factors, it's very hard to really achieve something. Well, what did we achieve until now? This square, which was flooded, has been redone. So parking places have been removed, and it's becoming a kind of a tiny park. With these rain barrels, we can store now like 50 cubic meters of water. So it's already quite an amount, especially given the fact that there is no place for, let's say, larger scale water storage in our neighborhood. We are working on a green roof project, a collective aanleg, collective construction and purchase of green roofs. And what is also very important, we try to really work together with the people that live in our neighborhood to also, increase the awareness, hoping that people also make, for instance, their own gardens greener, because that's where you can get a lot of benefit. So what I said, the group needs to represent the neighborhood and also need to understand the needs of different people and different lifestyles living there. And that's in our neighborhood really a specific but very important aspect. A high level of diverse expertise is required. So I am, as a landscape architect, I have some idea of how to design public space. But another person is very good at participation processes, and a third one is a traffic engineer, for instance. What we also notice, and that is, it's almost a cry for help to the three of you, is that it's a medium-sized municipality with a very small, a very small amount of people working there, very small staff. So the knowledge is limited. So they really want to do also climate adaptation, and then you see the design, and then they make a swale, a wadi, but it's just it's not connected. So it's not going from somewhere to somewhere, or it's just a little bit lower area in the place, which has some effect, but it could be so much more if you think about that a bit smarter. And all these elements make the barrier to join our group actually quite high. It's if you are just someone with green fingers and you want to do something fun, let's say with green, those people, they are often very disappointed in what we do. the expectations of citizens can also be very, very high. And then, yeah, sometimes they are disappointed or even angry. Well, that sounds a bit negative, but all in all, we can still, yeah, change a lot of things in our neighborhood. And I think also this is how it works. I work on this very large scale perspective, so long-term perspectives, but in the end, if you can change the street, you can change the world. Is what this person, Jeanette Sadiq Khan, once said. Thank you.
Thank you for this very inspiring presentation. Any questions for Rens?
Yes.
From the audience? I definitely have a question. Can a city also kind of start such a group? How can they facilitate the existence or the start of such a group of active people? Or do you just have to be lucky as a city that some citizens rise to start such a group?
This group was the result of a participatory process around the gebiedsagenda, and where they had this very big participation evenings with 50 to 100 people. But what you in the end see is that, and that's also my professional experience, in every neighborhood you have, let's say, the usual suspects, retired people that are always at these kind of meetings, and they are also the initiators of this group. Yeah. I wish I could, but then that takes a bit too long. Yeah.
In the different neighborhoods, local networks were facilitating it. So I think that this would require action from
Yeah. Yeah, and what you see is we have, as I said, we have a very good project manager, but he is a project manager. He doesn't know anything about the content, let's say. So what he basically does is, if we come up with some kind of proposal for a green structure, the first thing he starts to do is split it up in different small projects, because that's something he can manage. And then we do the projects one by one, but most of the time you can do only one of the projects that you need to have in this integrated development. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I think this one, because this microphone makes a little bit less noise. I think this was already a nice start of a discussion for which I want to invite all of you, actually, because I think we heard some nice stories about success factors, but also about challenges when we implement nature-based solutions. So, starting off with this very long-term perspective that I sketched, like if we think about this maybe ideal nature-based city, what might it look like? Going towards the Amsterdam perspective, where things are actually already happening now, but where there is already also a vision, like how to implement this in the near future and how to focus on these crucial areas and to take this rainproof approach on board in upcoming projects. And then we zoomed in even a bit further, you could say, into the neighborhood and the street with the two stories of Jeroen and Rens. And besides this cross-scale perspective, I think we've also seen this is a bit this cross-scale perspective, you could say. Yeah? So we started off in this very long term on this regional city scale, but we see that also things are already happening. Rainproof, which is not only a city-wide vision, but even going up to the street level, and then this neighborhood street examples from Jeroen and Rens. But I think we also saw, we shared stories from different perspectives, from academia, from the citizen perspective, from the city perspective. And well, there are challenges from all these perspectives in implementing these nature-based solutions. So I would like to invite the three of you to come to the fore, and then I would like to start with the first statement or question, I rather say. So you showed that on the short term we can already take actions and things are already happening. There are challenges, we are learning still. We have long-term ideas about what we want our cities to be, how should they look climate adaptive. But what is now our first step to take? What are your experiences that, how can we connect our long-term ambitions with our short-term actions? Maybe Daniel, do you want to respond first?
Yeah. One of the things that I see is that if you have this long-scale vision, what you want to do is actually connect the projects which you're going to do on maintenance in the city to this long vision. So you need actually a level in between to make it more tangible, make it more feasible for actually to see what you want to do in this project. So I think the rainproof solution maps are an example of this, but we're actually trying to broaden this not just from a water perspective, but also from a green and a biodiversity perspective, to have a more like visionary, well, it's not visionary maps, but I would say like solution maps for your neighborhood. So you would be able to then from that on implement it.
I must say, I totally agree. Just find out what you want to do and do it each time and keep on learning from all the new projects you do. And also if you have a solution which you're not sure of, like you just showed, and then you have to pilot it for a while and then monitor it and then decide if you're going to do it or not. But in the end, you come up with a list of solutions and examples which fit in. And every new project, this has to be picked up and done again and again.
And how do we avoid maybe the pitfall that you mentioned nicely, that we do a project and then things are changing and we have to redo that? Like, yeah, of course there should be room for learning, but to what extent? How can you
no, but there's not a pitfall. You mean that climate is changing in between?
Yes.
Yes, but this is just there's not one moment in which we say this is sufficient and this is climate resilient. But we have to keep on learning and keep on keeping an eye on the climate change and change our goals all the time. But if you say the goal is I don't want water in the street, in the houses 1 in 100 years, then it's quite easy because then you just say, oh, there's a bit more water coming, and then the goal is the same. So it's not so hard. And in the end, I believe it should not solve all the everything with climate adaptation. It's good that people suffer a little bit because they should feel that they should stop the climate change.
Yeah, can I add something to that? Because I showed that flood, of course, and yeah, I think it was in Zeeland. They said like, give us daily water and bread and every year flood. Geef ons dagelijks water en brood en iedere 5 jaar een watersnood, because it's a wake-up call and it generates awareness, and that's of course the problem with what we are working on. It's a very long-term thing and people don't really notice it. I experience a very big gap, a governance gap, I would say, between what is in this statement. So in many smaller municipalities there is lots of low-hanging fruit which is not picked, and that's because somewhere in between this knowledge doesn't drip through, let's say. So that's, I feel it's in the governance level where steps should be taken.
Yeah, because I think you nicely showed some success factors, but you also experienced, I think, clear barriers for uptake, or where you said almost a cry for help. Because I think a municipality as Amsterdam and its institutions offer a lot of opportunities also in terms of resources and to experiment also and to implement these kind of solutions. How do you see that this can trickle down towards other municipalities, or do you already have experience that you can help them overcome barriers
Well, the one thing is that I really dislike what's happening all over the Netherlands is that we're piloting projects in every city again and again and again, whilst we're not really looking at each other. What are the lessons learned from projects done in Utrecht and in what's learned in I don't know, another small town? They always want to test it themselves first, and then I'm thinking, well, okay, you're going to lose 5 years of time of testing, while we know that if you want to have these green pavers, you need a certain construction underneath it, you need a certain soil condition underneath it for it to work. So there are all kinds of lessons to be learned. And so I would always, so this is what I like to be joining in with the project that Reinder is now doing on these green pavers, is that we're trying to, let's say, close the gap of all these smaller experiments which are already happening everywhere, and then try to really learn from this. And that's still, I think that's still really quite, I don't know, quite a step to take. Well, the thing is so we are doing it now. So you as an institution are doing it now, but really to get this to the people who are doing the maintenance, who are doing the design, that's really the big gap to take. Yeah.
Yeah, so if we talk about main barriers and opportunities, so you see the barriers actually there and the chances to upscale, to maybe also, as presented by you, Jeroen, to formulate more general guidelines based on the experience we already have, instead of building upon new experiments and new experiments.
Yeah, and also what I also think is that you, if you see a certain solution which works, try to stick to it and try not to really, and then actually improve it instead of going to another new kind of solution which has a new innovative testing. This is what I'm sorry to say, but I mean, scientists really like to do. They really like to, especially at Waternet, where I'm working with, there's something new, we really need to test this. And I'm like, okay, why do you want to test this? And if this works, how many places in the city do you think it will work? Well, perhaps 5. I think, well, 5. I mean, it's like 1,000 we would need. So you need to test things which are you able to upscale. That's also what I think. Oh, yeah.
Yes, I was wondering, how do you see politicizing and depoliticizing as a way to implement more nature-based solutions, such as the Delta program, which has its own funds, its own program that's completely apart from political influences, so apart from the 4-year time frame, basically, that people usually operate on. How do you see that? Do you think that could be important, or?
I think in some way we're quite lucky with the Delta program and for water safety, but also in the sewer systems that are specially taxes for the municipal taxes for sewer system and water management. If not, then it would be harder. So there is money available in this direction. The money is not for urban heat, so that's already more difficult. So it helps.
Yeah, I concur.
Any other responses from?
One of the things we also see now is that there is quite so. I think it's really great that at the national level, they're really doing things, and that's really initiated quite some things with the. Every municipality has to do a stress test, has to make a plan, these kinds of things. So that really got a lot of energy to it. But you also want to have some rules and regulations which can be worked on for the rest. But then what we're hearing now is that municipalities are not allowed to go beyond things that the national level would say. And then we're saying, well, okay, well, we are working on this for many years, and we are far beyond what you're trying to accomplish. And then saying that you're not allowed to go beyond, that would be really a setback for us. So that's things which are now, yeah, they're saying that with with a bang, and these are all kinds of things. Yeah, so that's also things which we are seeing. So we have this rainwater ordinance, and some municipalities have this. So that means that every new building is obliged to store a certain amount of rainwater on its plot. So that's not national rules. So we're going beyond which the national rules are thought of. So we're really looking at these kinds of things. Yeah.
I do have another additional question that was not proposed on the slides, but we have this for climate, but do we also need this for green, for nature-based solutions? Should nature-based solutions become an element in all our ambitions for climate adaptation, formalized, like in a Delta plan for green? Or would that make it more difficult?
It's a very conceptual thing, of course, nature-based solution. And so I think it works. Yeah, thanks. I hope you could hear me. I said my opinion is that nature-based solutions is a very conceptual approach, which helps to basically find solutions and to approach the city as a potential ecosystem, for instance. Those are aspects that really help to make a nicer city, which I think is awesome. At the same time, because of this abstract level, I'm not sure if you can really put that as a term in policy. You cannot break it down to, or maybe you know more about that than me, but I don't see how to break that down to real performance indicators, for instance. So I would say no in that sense. Though I'm enthusiastic about everything that I see, but I think you need to approach them. I think, for instance, rainproof, heatproof, those things are much easier to bring to targets and to design features.
Maybe we say the same, but I see that nature-based solutions is just many green solutions or other solutions which use the same things as in nature. So it doesn't matter if it's nature-based, but some of the solutions are nature-based and have additional benefits aiming at nature. And then of course there are barriers, and one of them, which I said, was, is the money available? And the municipality in general have hardly any money for the maintenance of green. So that's a big barrier.
Yeah, also one of the things is that I think important, I mean, if you look at heat stress, if you look at heavy downpours, these are events happening. But if you look at an ecosystem of the city, I mean, you really need to improve the ecosystem in the city. So I think that's going to be even a higher driver, adding green, big quality of green, a diversity of green in the city, which is going to actually, from then on, I mean, the other cases are even going to be more or less solved in that, I hope. So I think the biodiversity is going to be the most important driver in the near future.
Well, thank you, all of you. I think so. To conclude, there is more work to be done, and the ambitions to formulate are there, but also how to translate these successful initiatives also that you showed towards more large-scale implementation in nature-based solutions, to learn also from the experiments that we're doing, and to use those design guidelines in practice. To show also how citizens can contribute and how also in the smaller municipalities things can go to the next level. Thanks a lot for sharing this with us today. Thank you for attending our session, and it's now time to go for some final refreshments.